Um, I guess I'll try see if I can fly blind without my script
Mm.
because I mean it's going to be different anyway.
This can be a casual episode, like every
Casual
bonus episode
episode.
of a podcast, because our normal episodes are so formal.
Hello and welcome to 1 Week, 1 Year, a podcast where nope, I need my script.
Nope, that's the start. That's the start. We're keeping it in.
Fine. It's a podcast where we normally each week talk about a different year in cinema history, starting from the very beginning. You go on that journey with us through film history. But right now, we thought that it might be a nice thing at the end of every decade to do a little recap, do a little summing up, and see how we feel about what has transpired.
An in summation episode, as it were.
Would that it were.
So simple.
I'm one of your hosts, Chris. I'm a film projectionist who is unemployed, but, that in name. Joining me as always is...
I am Glen. I am a filmmaker and film editor. I guess they're kind of, one is part of the other. I could just say filmmaker. I don't know why I'm tacking on editor on there.
Ooh, we're getting loose with this one already. My goodness.
Yeah. It's the bonus episode. It's what you expect.
Bonus episode. Yeah. This is exclusive to the Patreon. If you're not subscribed to our Patreon, close the window now because you're not allowed to listen to this. Anyway, this is what? I guess this is our 16th episode, something like that. We have started in 1895 and we are now moving into the 1910s when feature films are really getting started. What is what we expect to be happening. But yeah, figured we just think and talk about a little about what we've seen so far and what we've learned on this journey.
Yeah. I feel like I have learned many things.
Give me a thing you've learned.
One thing that I guess has stood out in the films of 1900 to 1909 is how early a lot of things showed up in film.
Yeah.
That I didn't necessarily expect. I didn't expect to see any color or sound films from this time period.
Particularly those, yeah.
Yeah. And I had never seen those before. I had maybe heard of like the early color experiments, but I'd certainly never watched them.
Had you seen like one of those color serpentine dances before? I feel like those kind of float around a bit.
Yeah.
You know?
But those are hand colored.
Yeah.
I'd certainly seen like the hand colored films a little bit. But even those are surprising with how like elaborate they get.
Yeah. We talk about like the different coloring systems. Some of them are slavishly done by hand on every frame, as were originally done on Magic Lantern slides. But yeah, it's a humongous process that some films just thought it was worth doing to be able to charge a little more for the movie itself. And then there were others that used stencils, and there were some experimentations with color wheels toward the end of the decade, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think the only other my biggest takeaway is like how slept on this period of history kind of is. Like other than literally two films from this decade, pretty much all the rest are kind of consigned to like curiosities or just sort of like and the rest like and there's a lot of cool interesting things happening in them, and it's I guess it's a little bit of a shame that they kind of get skipped over in most history books or like general histories of film.
Yeah, I mean, they're especially with the creativity in the visuals and what they're doing, watching these new special effects and some of them kind of gaining in polish as the years go on. There's a lot of just fun, whimsical stuff that I think really stands the test of time. Really just enjoyable to look at and pleasing to look at. I mean, particularly a lot of these Ferry movies.
Oui.
Made by Méliès and Pathé, which I found out today. We've been calling Pathé, but it's pronounced pâté.
Right, yeah.
Oops.
We've definitely been mispronouncing that and Gaumont a bunch.
Gaumont.
But c'est la vie.
We should, doing this podcast has made me really wish that I spoke a little French, Or you feel like you're missing out a little bit on early cinema history, especially if you're trying to do a bit of primary research, if you can't read French.
Yeah.
I would love to dig through the Star Films catalog and the Lumiere catalog, just talking like reading over their notes, their original notes on everything.
Oh,
That'd
yeah,
be a lot of fun.
That would be super interesting, I'm sure. I definitely had a thought yesterday watching our our contemporary movies about the time period. I was like, I want to go to France.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, that's not gonna happen anytime soon. But
I've got my fingers crossed. I'm hoping for. I have tickets to go to the UK and France in June, and I'm hoping that it might work out by then. Hopefully.
I mean, I hope so too. I mean, I don't know how confident or optimistic I am about it, but I'm very hopeful.
If you were to visit France on a journey highlighting some of this film stuff, where would you go?
I mean, I would have to go to Paris, just because. But I would probably also try to. I think, given the, time and money, if I was able to actually visit other places, I would definitely want to try to visit the Lumiere factory, or
if it's still around, yeah.
Or yeah, I mean, some of the places where Alice Guy shot her chase movies, I think would be pretty fun to visit. Certainly the film museums in France look super cool.
Yeah,
that would be
there's
a huge
a
one.
film museum in the Netherlands. There's one in Italy, and there's one in France that I've just been seeing so much from in doing research here, and just have my eye on them. One of them's called the Eye Film Museum, so oops. But yeah, the one that I have had just in my head ever since the beginning is I want to go to La Ciotat station. The train station that the train arrived at,
Yeah, that would be cool.
Set up my phone camera right there. I love doing when I'm traveling, doing sort of dumb things, dumb journeys for just to do them, metaphorical reasons. Mm-hmm. It's the same reason why I drove 8 hours to catch a Mewtwo. Not even in the heyday of Pokemon Go, but a couple years later.
Hey, it's still going. It's still a thing.
You gotta do it for the bit,
Yeah. Yeah, I like doing stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing on this podcast in a sort of...
A lot of bits.
A lot of bits, and also very involved, I guess, metaphorical journeying through history. For the sake of just, neat.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I appreciate that we're doing this just for the sake of itself, because having the education come out of this has been so nice. Even this ancillary education through researching the news segments, I feel like I've learned so much about turn of the century history. And, part of the fun of this is that we get to get really nitty gritty, even though this is such a broad podcast over the scope of what it is supposed to be, if it's going to go all the way up to now.
We learned so much about the Dreyfus affair.
Yeah,
just
absolutely,
because there was an important movie made about it. Several, actually.
I have so many YouTube or not YouTube, Wikipedia tabs open from doing historical research. Then I'm like, oh, I want to read more about that. But
Yeah.
also, history's
Yeah.
boring. It's a history podcast, but it's also, come on, movies.
Yeah.
Movies.
Movies are
But
fun.
it's also interesting, yes.
History is boring. History is boring. Stories are fun.
There we go. And something that we saw in this decade was, people were telling stories in the beginning of the decade in the 1890s, but it was very, very, very simplistic stuff. It's the kind of thing that you would struggle to call a story, and maybe it's just more of a basic scenario, right?
Yeah.
But by the end of the decade, as people are getting more confident with editing and shot composition and acting, we're starting to see stuff that is a lot more complex and deals with more, deep emotions, which, it's a stage being set for like actual cinema. I think there's a lot of fun with the trick films, but they're not telling stories so much.
Yeah, it's one of the really fun things about watching movies from this early is seeing how quickly they evolve and change and develop.
Yeah.
I was looking back at some of the movies from 1900, and they're like so wildly different from the movies from 1909. Like there's such a huge gap in just like, the from a technical level for sure, but also just with like the ambition of them and like the types of stories they're trying to tell.
Yeah, a lot more maturity. I'll bring in this segment from later just a little bit, just because it's relevant. Is I don't know if you ended up watching the movie The Extraordinary Voyage, which is a documentary about a trip to the moon. It's partially about the restoration and has interviews with a few contemporary French directors, kind of talking about Méliès. One of the people from the movie, from The Extraordinary Voyage, talked about how Méliès was a showman and a jokester, but cinema was entering a serious phase, which I think we saw. We put a lot of praise on Méliès, and I think he deserves a lot of praise. But there's a lot of innovating that everyone started doing that he just kind of refused to and stayed in his lane in a lot of ways. It was what he was good at, and it's what he liked doing. But the audiences were not really feeling kind of silly trick films and dancing imps anymore, which is a little sad.
Yeah, they want tragedy.
Yeah, seriously. With just the amount of the amount of tragedy, like what a glutton for tragedy D.W. Griffith is in just these first 2 years.
Yeah.
Like he's a dour
Yeah.
man.
But before him, it was kind of going that direction anyway. Capellani was doing a lot of tragic melodramas.
Yeah.
A couple of years leading up to that. Ferdinand Zecca kind of built his whole career out of that. Like all of his biggest movies are kind of these like very, very sad melodramas.
That's true. Yeah. The was it the alcohol one? The one based on the Emile Zola book. Ends with the guy being driven crazy by his alcohol addiction, and then of course History of a Crime ends with a big old guillotine. I was thinking about a little bit about what genres were popular over the course of the decade, and in the beginning we saw the fall of the actuality, right? I think that was the first step of movies moving from their like super nascent phase into something a little more legitimate and storytelling focused.
Moving from a very literal sense of like moving pictures,
Yeah,
to something that was much much more elaborate and much more complex and much more focused on creating a narrative.
Yeah. And actually, I probably should have talked about this earlier, but I want to just sum up a little bit of the things uh, that we've seen out of movies and like the raw numbers a little bit. We have seen movies that have been original stories adapted from books, comic strips, poems, current news, popular songs at the time, fairy tales, and movies that have been adapted from other movies, not just remakes but
A
ripoffs.
lot of those. A lot of those.
And Glenn, I don't know if you looked at this when I sent you the spreadsheet, but if you were to guess how many movies we talked about over the course of the podcast, how many do you think it would be?
A few hundred.
So just in this decade that we're talking about, we've talked about 185 movies,
Oh, man.
303 total. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of makes sense because most of them are very short. And so I do definitely feel like we have watched a lot of them.
Yeah. A lot. I mean, we've seen a good chunk of the ones that are actually available to watch from this era.
Yeah, I feel good about that. I feel like it's
Yeah, right?
I feel like it's an accomplishment, I guess. I feel sort of like as a filmmaker, I definitely feel like it's adding to my clout and my bona fides. Sort of. I'm sort of like I've watched all the old ones.
Could put it on your business card. Say, have seen every movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, so like, if I ever one day, fingers crossed, get into a conversation with like, Scorsese or Coppola or somebody, I can be like, so, those Deschamons films are really something, huh?
Speaking of that, actually, have you? What are some things that you feel like as a filmmaker that you've learned from watching movies so far and taken from them?
I don't know if it's like a specific thing that I've learned, but it is always kind of a little bit inspiring to watch how silent films tell stories using no dialogue.
Yeah.
And like, especially I think with some of the more recent ones that we've watched with cross-cutting, how much heavy lifting editing can do. Which is always something that I've known pretty much, but it's cool to see that develop of like going from like a single scene being just one shot and then another scene just being another shot to starting to sort of intermingle the two and having scenes flow together and yeah, I'm trying to think of any like specific things that I really feel like I've learned, and there aren't really that many. I mean, there's some like cool techniques or cool shots that I'm like, I could steal that.
Right. I mean, it is all pretty simple stuff, I guess, that we're watching.
Yeah, it is. A lot of it does feel, in a way, like they were learning in real time over the course of years what like film students learn the first
like
week.
Yeah.
Pretty much of just like, here is what, like how editing works and like how framing works and like the very kind of fundamentals, but it's really cool to see that stuff getting figured out.
Yeah, to be honest, like, you're talking about how impressive it is, how quickly they're figuring out a lot of this stuff, but since we are stretching it out a lot, it is also a little frustrating. I just wish that they would just figure it out instantly, but yeah. I guess that's not reasonable.
Although it's also interesting to see when it's sort of like when there's almost resistance or like attempts to kind of pull it in other directions that didn't really kind of ended in dead ends. Like I think the whole kind of fairy genre led to so much, but in and of itself ended up seeming like kind of turned into a dead end because it was so I guess tied to like theatricality right. In the literal sense of recreating theater and sort of stuff being shot as if it is a stage, to the point where like I genuinely think that one of the reasons why Méliès might have been resistant to like doing close-ups is because that means the person's head would have been really big in the frame, like on the screen, and he would have been like, then the audience is going to think that the head is giant. Like, that's the only time he ever does it in any of his
when
movies.
a head is giant.
When a head gets blown up like a balloon, or like a giant shows up and it's like they're bigger in the frame.
Right. It's more of like a literal interpretation of the space behind a frame rather than being able to manipulate the size of things, realizing that it's an artificial window into another world, and you can use that window to look at whatever you want.
Yeah.
You know.
And yeah, trying to think of like how much. I think it's also interesting. We're watching all these kind of dour melodramas that are very, trying to tell very like real stories. You know, they're like shot on location and, based on either like contemporary novels or true stories and things. And then there's all these other movies where it's like, this movie is about like mermaids dancing underwater, and it's like, that's the whole thing.
It's strange. Like, I mean, you can see it especially in the difference between the French and the Americans, what they're trying to do typically.
And then also, like, it is very cool to see the people who are like bridging that gap also a little bit. And yeah, there's another big takeaway is like, there are so few American movies that I thought were good or enjoyable from this decade.
Yeah.
Like,
and people think of America as like the place where cinema was born, you know?
Hell
but
no. France, it was France, 100%. Like,
yeah.
That is one thing that I am like firm, that is like a very firm belief I have now, is like, no, film is a French, or it started as a French thing. I wouldn't say it's purely a French thing now, but certainly the first 15 years of filmmaking was entirely being pushed by the French.
Yeah. The Americans, we have not been too fond of them this entire show.
I look forward to the day that we can like fondly talk about American movies.
Right. Maybe after D.W. Griffith is gone.
Well, I think we got Chaplin coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, that's true. I'm excited to watch some Chaplin.
Oh yeah, me too. I am so excited to watch his stuff.
What
because I haven't seen a lot of his really early movies, so
yeah, I don't know. I've seen The Great Dictator. I don't remember if I've seen any of his other movies actually. Maybe I'm more of a Buster Keaton guy.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I don't.
Is
think
there anything that you're looking forward to in the next decade?
I mean, yeah, Chaplin and I guess Buster Keaton's only really doing shorts or the next decade, I think. Similarly to Chaplin, I'm excited to see more Max Linder stuff. 'Cause he's great. And I think seeing more features is gonna be cool. Watching probably less movies for each episode.
Yeah.
But those movies being longer and richer will be. I'm excited for that transition to happen. To be like, all right, we watched these 4 movies. Let's like get into it, and for there to be the material to do that with, like actually being able to like talk about stuff at length and not just being like, this one was fun.
Right. Yeah. Our show will be getting a bit of a mix-up once long movies start becoming a thing. Though I feel like there's got to be some way that we can integrate serials and certain shorts that are relevant.
Yeah, there's definitely some serials that I really want to watch, and even if we don't fully get into them on the air, I want to watch them just because like there's a 8-hour serial about vampires.
Is it called I think it's just called The Vampires, and it's like a crime thing, right? Or is it actually about
I
vampires?
was under the impression it's about vampires. I'll be very
Oh,
disappointed if it's not now.
well, we'll find out. I was also thinking about how if we go straight from when we start talking about feature films, if we don't integrate shorts a little bit, it's going to be like the technology of animated films went straight from Emile Cole to Snow White, and that,
Yeah.
so we're going to need to integrate a few shorts to let that
Yeah,
uh,
and
uh, happen as well.
I think so many like historical greats got started in shorts. I mean, like
Yeah.
Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, a lot of those like early movie stars got started doing shorts, and so I definitely think we're gonna watch a good number of those. I would think.
So, I mean, something that I am interested in general with this project is seeing the early work of famous filmmakers who we don't often see
Mm.
their start, their debuts and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Took them a while to get established, and so we don't see the piranhas of Joe Dante and
Right.
and whatnot. Um, I think for the 1910s, something that I'm kind of interested in is, I think the bulk of famous silent films are from the 20s, or
Mm-hmm.
well respected silent films.
Yeah.
And so I'm really interested in seeing a lot of undiscovered stuff that I'm sure is lying around in the 1910s.
That was certainly one of the exciting and like joyful things about the 1900s was seeing a bunch of stuff that I had never seen or heard of,
Yeah.
and the stuff that was really good being such like a pleasant surprise, being like I'd never heard of this. This is great.
Yeah.
Um, and I think certainly like what little looking ahead I've done to the 1910s, I think is going to be some really cool stuff.
Stay tuned, folks.
Yeah. It's only going to get better from here, I think. Um, yeah, I'm very excited about the 1910s. I'm sort of dreading watching DW Griffith movies, I guess. But other than that, I'm like purely just excited.
Before we move on to the next section, one other thing that I wanted to talk about, a takeaway that I had from watching these movies,
Mm.
is I feel like it is it like a matter of access. A lot of this stuff is public domain.
Mm.
These are works that are part of cinema's lineage that are important to be able to be seen and to be used. I think that it's really important that stuff that's in the public domain should be able to be actually played around with. And yet a lot of this stuff is hidden away in archives and behind paid services, region exclusive services. It's in terrible quality on YouTube, uploaded in 2006. And
Why it's always 2006 too.
it is, right? I think that might have been just the early year of YouTube where they were just like, upload everything. And when they got done taking down all the Stargate SG-1 episodes, all of the copyright-free stuff what was left. Um,
Yep.
but yeah, it has made me just really, part of the idea with this project is that we're constantly moving forward. But it's really made me want to have something to focus in on this era, because I feel like this era needs so much attention. I
Hmm.
wish that someone could come and say, like, look, here is a central resource where all of this stuff that is part of your uh it belongs to you, like people who make
Mm.
stuff, um and people who want to enjoy cinema history. Here it is, and not make it
Yeah.
into such of a project. Like a lot of what we do in preparation for these podcasts is just hunt down like various sources and try and find ones with music and without music, different quality and everything like that. It would be so nice if there were like a really centralized resource for
Yeah.
all this stuff. Something that
My
I thought would be really cool too is if people could like contribute their own music, different tracks for each one.
That would be
That'd be
really cool.
yeah.
Um, yeah, my process for watching pretty much any movie for this podcast so far has been search the title on YouTube with the year
Yeah.
usually in multiple languages because most of them are French or Italian or Swedish or whatever, and open literally every single upload on YouTube, of
Yeah.
which they were usually between probably 4 and 20, and watch about a second or two of each one and see which one is the best quality.
Yep.
And oftentimes I will like open up 15 tabs of the same exact thing, and they're all
Yep.
identical, terrible quality.
Oh my god.
And then I'll look it up to see if I can find it on some other website, and occasionally I'll find it on like some other weird, like museum site or something, or like BFI
Yeah, or
will
like
have,
the Library of Congress or something like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
and then anything British is like region locked by the BFI.
Come on.
Um,
Come on.
come on, BFI, we know you listen to this podcast.
Come on, BFI. Let me use my VPN. It blocks the VPN. It's the whole point.
Whoa,
it's the whole point.
really? Wow.
Yeah. I've been itching to watch stuff on the BFI player, but the VPN, it says no, you don't live here.
Damn. And yeah, it's like, so I've been able to find stuff in like really excellent quality on like usually a lot of like foreign sites
Yeah.
from whatever country of origin the films were made. But it's always almost always a big hassle to find anything of like watchable quality. There's stuff that is publicly available that I skipped because I was like, this is in such terrible quality, it's not worth watching.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that, I mean, I think there's real degradation that can be contributing to this lack of quality in a lot of stuff, but a lot of the time it's just these were made DVD era, pre-DVD era,
VHS era, a lot of them.
and nobody has done anything with them since then.
And
the thing is that like these movies, if they were to be projected, probably would have tons of quality.
Yeah.
Film itself has probably roughly equivalent to like 4K of visual fidelity.
Beyond that, like way more. I mean, because it's just grain, like it's just a picture. I don't know. It's like if you were to try to measure it in digital resolution, it's like, I don't know. Ask Chris Nolan. He's probably measured it.
Well, to get a little technical, I think it has something to do with the part of the texture of film grain is how the silver halide crystals in film are varying sizes. It's kind of just a smattering of different sized little crystals all over this piece of film, and those are effectively pixels, sort of, because each crystal can only hold one piece of color information or black and white information. And so what I've heard is that it's like roughly or slightly higher than 4K, and like IMAX film is probably closer to 8K, but that's all very rough. It also depends on like the speed of the film and everything like that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the frustrating things about that is like a lot of the stuff that's in low quality is like digital low quality. It's not like the film print looks
doesn't
good.
that sting?
And then it's like, and then especially sometimes when it's like I'm digging through and I find all these like low quality, 240p YouTube uploads
Or worse.
and then I find it in like crystal clear HD quality, and I'm like, this movie looks amazing. It's so rich, and like the backdrops in it are like super detailed and cool, and like you can see the people's faces and their performances and things like that, and it's like all of that is lost through these like blocky compressed files that are way easier to find but are awful.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that like I think that to a lot of film releasing companies, that because this stuff is copyright free, and because nobody really wants to watch it, they don't really opt for doing anything, which is a shame. And if they do something, it's a really full restoration, right?
Hmm.
Which I think restorations are great, but literally, if you just scanned all of this stuff and put it online, you don't need to
Mm.
restore it. It would be so much better, so
Yeah.
much better,
Yeah.
and so much less work and cost.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's the thing is like I feel like Library of Congress, even though the like public uh viewable online viewable versions of these are usually easy to find and available, they're usually not very high resolution. And I doubt that's what they were scanned at. I don't know. But it's
I've
the
seen
sort of
some
things
really
like
high resolution Library of Congress uploads, but I think they've been digitizing stuff for the last 15, 20 years, and
yeah.
I saw this is looking into the sausage factory a little bit, but we recorded 1910 earlier than this, and one of the movies for 1910 was an Alice in Wonderland movie, and uh, I found the best quality of it on YouTube of someone who actually asked the Library of Congress to scan their copy and like paid for them to do it.
Hmm.
And so they have all of the equipment, they're just
Hmm.
not using
Hmm.
it, I guess, or they have,
We
they're too busy.
we got to find out who has Segundo de Chamon's film catalog and pay them
Okay, so
to scan all his movies.
here's another thing that I got from the Extraordinary Voyage is that there is someone named Anton Gimenez, who is the head of the Barcelona archive, and apparently he is someone who is a particularly a Segundo de Chamon archivist. So we got to hit up that
Yeah,
guy.
we got to email that guy.
Anyway, speaking of the Extraordinary Voyage, which is a documentary that comes with most of the recent Blu-ray releases of Voyage, the Trip to the Moon.
Mm.
We watched a few movies, contemporary movies that are about this era, and in particular, Be Natural, the Alice Guy-Blaché story, and Hugo.
The Scorsese movie.
The Hugo the Scorsese movie.
Yeah, the subtitle.
Hugo the Scorsese story.
Which is about Georges Méliès, if you haven't seen Hugo.
Tangentially, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's. I feel like that's like the main point of the movie is like Méliès is great. He's so cool.
Yeah.
He's
I
not
will admit
the lead character, but
I mean, maybe it was the movie itself, just the movie itself, but maybe also it was just all of the thought and time and effort that we put into this. I was watching this big like respect fest for Méliès, and I was getting so misty, I was like, ooh, oh, he's finally getting his recognition.
I got emotional watching both of these movies. Like I had that kind of like misty like now they're old.
Yeah, true. Old woman. Not to jump around too much, but old woman Alice Guy-Blaché that you see in footage in Be Natural. She's such a cute old lady.
Yeah, that was pretty wild to me. I guess we can talk about that one first,
Sure.
since we're doing it now. I didn't know that movie had footage or interviews with Alice Guy-Blaché.
Yeah.
Which is super cool. They were all filmed in the early 1960s, I believe.
Yeah, late 50s and early 60s.
And I don't know. I've never like expected to see or hear anyone from this era actually talk about their life or work.
Yeah, you think these people are locked into silence based on their time in history.
Pretty much. Like if I was like, it would be so cool to see even like a old interview from the 30s of Georges Méliès. I doubt any exist because it seemed like he was kind of didn't like to talk about it too much.
Well, so there is I didn't see a video, but there is audio in The Extraordinary Voyage of Méliès
Ah,
speaking in an interview.
damn. I guess I
I
gotta
don't
watch
know if
this.
there's video.
Um, but yeah, there's a lot of really good interview footage with Aliski in Be Natural. And yeah, it's super interesting just to hear her actually talk about like everything about how she approached it, because she was one of the people who saw the Lumiere brothers show.
She not only saw the first public screening, which is the one that we talked about that
Yeah,
Méliès went to. She
she
went to a previous
yeah
screening months earlier that was the even more exclusive screening.
yeah. So she knew about movies from pretty much the moment that they existed, which is pretty wild.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't know, it's really, really, I think, cool and interesting to hear about, like, movies didn't exist yet, but she was just like, this seems cool. I'm in.
Right.
Let's do it. And then was one of the people to kind of set the standard of like what this thing even is. Um and then lived into the 1960s. And
Yeah.
like there's footage of her like getting on a jet, and that made me really emotional. I was like, "Oh, she's on a jet now? Like what? What a life." Um
Yeah. And the movie goes over a lot of her life. It's actually more. I didn't know all of this biographical information that the movie went through going in that to such a detail.
mhm.
Um, we've been mostly referring to her as Elise Guy-Blaché, which I guess is her name. But once you watch the movie and and
You
find
kind of want
out
to
about
leave off the Blaché
yeah,
part
just
because
Elise Guy, you know.
because was it what was her husband's name?
Herbert Blaché, he just sucked.
Yeah,
This is no
just
good.
just a real shitbag, it seems. Who would later be given credit for a lot of her accomplishments, which also is really really awful.
Really insulting, yeah. I
Um,
mean, she seems like a really chill person, even despite the sexism that she faced. Um, though she was just kind of correcting people, like, no, that was my movie, you know.
yeah.
uh,
Um, it was also cool to hear about too. Like a lot of that sexism didn't even come until later in her career. Like it wasn't until like the start of the studio system almost that it was like
yeah.
became more of a.
Even though she had this seniority.
I know. Um, and even that part too. Like I got, I got a little bit angry. I was like, "What? Like, why are all these dudes are just coming in and like setting up all these businesses and things?" I'm like, nah, this is our work.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just garbage. But it is kind of cool to hear about. Like at the start, there wasn't that sort of like, uh, like gender gap in filmmaking. Like it was, even though she was one
The
of
only one.
one of the only women making film at the time. Um, I mean, the only one for a good while. Yeah, it wasn't like a weird. I guess because like anyone making films at that time was a weird thing.
Yeah,
So
I guess it was a new medium, and so the patriarchal roles hadn't quite set in yet.
yeah, the
Um,
patriarchy hadn't got their mitts on it yet.
uh, this movie, I, I mean, I think for anyone interested in Elise Guy's life story, it's a pretty good thing to watch. I would, I thought it was okay. This movie,
I really liked it. I was
you really
very
liked it?
yeah, I did.
Oh,
I, I
nice.
I thought the like family history stuff and like hearing her actually talk about her life and career uh was made me emotional.
Oh, I like that stuff.
And
Definitely.
and yeah, it's also just like a really cool look at like the birth of filmmaking, like from the
Yeah.
very like kernel of this. I don't know what metaphor you want to use, from the start, from the beginning times.
I think, and maybe it's my bias coming in because uh I just like have a lot of experience with these talking heads plus After Effects documentaries that are looking back at a hyper specific entertainment biz thing, because that was like 50% of what I was running at South by Southwest. And so and so all these directors would come in and they'd be playing these movies. I'm just like, oh, like, I mean, I think the thing with this one is that I do care, but not to get way too into it, but I feel like there are documentaries that are made for people who care about the subject already, and there are documentaries that are made for anybody. And here's an entry point for you into this, right? This one is very much made for somebody who is already invested in what they're talking about. I think it would feel at home in a museum, like, well, you know how in those you can go into a museum and sit in their little screening room and watch the kind of more extended film version of what they're talking about. This feels like that to me, but it's definitely worth it for the context and for that interview footage. Oof, yeah.
Well, yeah, I feel like the more kind of personal angle of like tracing her family history and like talking to her relatives and stuff kind of gives it that human touch, I guess, that keeps it from feeling too sort of academic or dry.
Yeah.
I watched it with my parents, who are not. I mean, they're like curious people who like know a little bit about filmmaking. But they both really enjoyed it and were very. I could tell.
Oh,
were,
nice.
Like, hooked by it. Like they really liked it. Also Hugo.
Yeah. Did you watch Hugo with your folks as well?
For the first half, my mom watched it, and then my dad watched the whole thing, and they both enjoyed the parts that they saw.
Okay. Yeah, Hugo. It's a fun one.
It is.
I dig
I saw it when it came out, and I think I liked it more this time. Maybe it was because of the additional kind of context. But I also just think it was like, I don't know. I just appreciate it more, I guess. I think when I first saw it, I didn't even know it was about George Méliès, who I knew of back when it came out. But I was like, oh, this is why Scorsese made this like whimsical kids movie. It's because it's just about silent movies.
Yeah. It's very steampunk too.
Which is
this
a Méliès thing.
Yeah, yes. There's so many sounds of like ticking gears in this movie.
Well, yeah, it's funny because it is very steampunky, and like there's tons of gears and rivets and smoke and things. And it made me think about that, like that whole kind of aesthetic, I guess, probably does owe something to Georges Méliès.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
I mean, that is his like a big part of the aesthetic of his films, especially his more kind of sci-fi ish ones.
Yeah.
Of like having big silly gears and like things with rivets and steam and things. And so it did feel kind of, that was certainly something that I think I picked up on more on this watch. At the time, I think it reminded me more of someone more recent, like Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who is he directed Amélie and Delicatessen, and has is known for, I guess, sort of like whimsical French films.
Yeah. In that documentary, by the way, The Extraordinary Voyage, Jean-Pierre Jeunet compares Méliès to James Cameron, because of how he's an artist and a kind of technical inventor at the same time.
Yeah. That is a good comparison.
And because the documentary is from 2011, they're like, he's just like Avatar. Avatar!
Go see Avatar. One day, James Cameron will come out with 8 more of them. And so, yeah, I think having a sort of stronger uh, idea of like I guess the influences and like the history behind a lot of the stuff in Hugo made me probably appreciate that stuff more.
Yeah.
But then also, I don't know. I think at the time maybe I was younger and I was just more like, it's a kids movie, man. And now I'm just like, no,
Mm-hmm.
this is fun. I want to see like Borat try to like catch a kid. Um, all of the like side stories and stuff. I really liked. And feel very inspired by Jean-Pierre Jeunet. Like feel very Amelie-esque.
Yeah, I think that checks out. That it's very charming.
Yeah.
Um,
It is very funny that this movie is set in Paris. Every single character in it is French, and yet every single character also has a strong English accent. Like every
it's the,
character in it is French. They're all wearing berets, and they're like, "Oh, hello there. What's
yeah,
going on over here?"
including the Americans putting on a British
Um,
accent. I mean, I think that's just like
it's
that whole
mostly. I mean, it's mostly.
European.
Yeah, I mean, most of them have sort of, I guess, like RP, receipt pronunciation accents, like kind of classical English speech. But then, the uncle, played by Ray Winstone,
Was that Ray Winstone?
that is Ray Winstone, who has a very strong Cockney accent and just shows up and it's like, "Oh, you boy, I'm taking you to live in the train station," and it's like, it's France.
Well, it's just across the English Channel. Méliès did dig a tunnel across
Ah,
there. Um, I didn't see Hugo when it came out, but I remember people after it coming out calling it like one of the best possible uses of 3D in a movie. It's a great 3D movie, and that's how it should be seen. And so I held off for the longest time on watching it
mm,
because I wanted to see it in 3D. And we played it at my theater a couple times. The first time we played it for like a week straight, but I just never made a chance to see it. And it was in 3D. And then we played it a second time like a year or two later, and I finally was able to catch a screening of Hugo in 3D. Um, and yeah, it's very good 3D. I think it's like tasteful 3D, you know, and
yeah.
it uses a lot of the. It's not like super gimmicky, but it has a lot of depth in the steamwork tunnels or
Mm.
steampunk tunnels and gears and spires and whatnot. That it adds a fun. I mean, I think the using the 3D almost feels like a Méliès gimmick. You know,
It
it's
does.
it's
Yeah.
it's this technical gimmick that was new-ish at that time of the like digital 3D, and it adds, it's like a sense of whimsy on top of the movie. I think that it maybe would feel a little less whimsical in 2D, or at least the 3D kind of amplifies it, you know.
Yeah.
I'm realizing now that I actually have not seen the movie in 2D, because I remember, you know, I made such a trouble to see it in 3D, and then I was like, okay, like I'm ready, I'm gonna, you know, rent this movie or whatever and watch it on my computer, and then I said, oh wait, um, I don't have a 3D TV, but I do have a VR headset, and so I went on. There's a website where you can rent movies in a virtual reality theater and watch them in 3D on your VR headset, and so I was just able to just sit on my desktop chair and watch Hugo in 3D while having a big heavy thing on my face. So that was fun.
Was there like VR seats around you? And
Yeah. You can change like the environment that
I'm
it's
so
in,
jealous.
but honestly, it felt like it felt really nice to just like be in a theater seat again. You know?
Uh, what would Méliès think of the future of you sitting at home and putting on a big heavy thing on your face
I mean,
and
he'd
watching a
probably dig it.
3D film about him?
Wow. Yeah. Something to think about.
Watching Hugo did make me, for once, appreciate my facial hair.
Good. And if you're watching the YouTube version, you can appreciate his facial hair too. You gotta wax that thing, man. It would be so good. Look at that. That's amazing. I'm sorry for all the podcast listeners. Go to our YouTube channel, which is linked in the description, and subscribe to our Patreon so that we can buy Glenn some mustache wax.
That's our first goal of our non-existent Patreon.
Well, yeah. So it was. I thought we thought we'd take a little bit of a fun opportunity to watch some movies reflecting on this time that we had just covered.
I did think it was kind of one last thought about both of these is I thought it was kind of interesting to see how, like the parallels between both stories of Georges Méliès and Elise Guy. Hugo takes a lot of shortcuts, I guess, or sort of creative liberties with some of Méliès's life.
Yeah, sidebar, but like, oh my god, all that this podcast has given me is just being able to like cinema sins that Hugo thing. I was like, excuse me, the arrival of the train was in 1896, not 1895, and it wasn't at the original Lumiere screening, and people didn't think that it was real, and Georges Méliès didn't wander into a screening in a carnival. He went to one that was a ticketed screening in a hotel lobby.
And he wasn't married to his wife.
Yeah.
But that don't matter because it's a movie, and Scorsese was like, it don't matter.
Yeah.
It works better if I change stuff. But how, both of them, I mean, sort of got inspired by the Lumiere screening. So both of them kind of like were there from the start, like are very much like part of the first wave of film directors and people who are, I guess, you would consider directors now. Like they weren't just sort of like, I have a camera and I'm going to go film some waves. They were like, no. Like I have ideas.
Right. Yeah. They saw the magic in it.
Yeah. Yeah. They both, I think, make movies that, take advantage of film's kind of inherent, magicality of just sort of like, neither of them wanted to make like melodramas or actualities. They were like, no. Like Méliès is like, no, space, fairies, goblins, all that.
Yeah.
And Elise Guy is like,
sticky people.
Glue, mattress chases.
They both wanted to make movies about mattresses.
Yeah, the same year. Neither movie gets into that. But yeah, I don't know. Like Elise Guy is one of the very few filmmakers from this first 15 years of films that I feel like really tried to like make movies with social commentary.
Yeah,
there were a few others, but like hers have a very strong sense of like commenting on like social norms and like gender roles and things in a way that not many other people were doing. And how they both kind of had this like peak of fame and fortune where they like started their own companies and like became really I don't know how wealthy they became, but like had their sort of peak of success, and then it very quickly kind of tapered off around the same time. I guess Méliès a little bit earlier.
Right.
But yeah, both of them like by World War I were kind of like not making movies anymore. And then kind of lived in obscurity for a while, and then sort of had a resurgence. Méliès sort of ended his career earlier, but then had a pretty short period of like people not knowing much about him. Between like 1913 and the mid-20s, when like his films were rediscovered and they had the big gala, which is in Hugo. Whereas it seems like Elise Guy didn't really get a lot of recognition until like the like towards the end of her life.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Which is kind of sad, but I'm both of them had that thing of like later in life kind of getting that recognition and knowing that their work was appreciated and like how important it was, kind of.
That is nice.
So yeah, I think they made for a good double feature. They made for good kind of companion pieces to each other.
I will say too about that that Méliès revival screening in Hugo, and this isn't a CinemaSins gripe. This is just kind of an
Hmm.
interesting historical thing. Is that in Hugo they talk about how they've rediscovered 80 of his movies, um, but that was more like how many movies of his had been discovered at the time of the movie Hugo coming out.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
at that charity benefit in 1929, there were only 8 that they were able to find.
Mm.
They were Whimsical Illusions, The Spider and the Butterfly, The Wandering Jew, The Diabolic Tenant, God,
Mm.
uh, Baron Munchausen's Dream, The Merry Frolics of Satan, Trip to the Moon, and The Conquest of the Pole. Almost
Mm.
entirely movies from his last couple of years that still survived.
Yeah.
Um, and the show was so short that it had to be padded out with an American feature film, to which is kind of insulting, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Did it say which one?
they did not. No,
No.
I took a picture of the playbill. They showed it in that documentary, and that's how I just figured out which of these 8 movies they were playing. It might have mentioned the American movie in
Yeah.
French. Um,
That's so funny. Just like, and also now we're just gonna show this other movie.
yeah, right. Like so weird. um, and now I think it's about time that we talk about our top 10 of the 19 aughts. We both made a couple lists. I kind of definitely went for the ones that had the most impact on me. I don't know about like
Mm.
quality versus their time or whatever, but
Yeah, I mean, I tried to be pretty subjective about it.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I didn't get that in the weeds about like what order they're in.
Oh, okay.
Um,
I did.
other than the first couple, I tried to
Okay.
put the best of the best at the top.
Yeah. Um
We start with our number tens, I guess, and work our way
okay.
up to the number one.
Sure. My number 10 was The Life and Passion of Jesus Christ by Ferdinand Zecca and
Mm.
Lucien Nonguet. Nonguet? I
Non
don't know.
non joué non
Nonguet.
I don't know.
Nongui.
You should never defer to me, even though I did take 3 semesters of French, because I'm
That's a
still
lot of semesters.
I'm still wrong most of the time.
um, this was a movie that was produced between 1903 and 1905 by those 2 directors who are French and I can't say their names. Um, and I just remember being just so impressed with this movie of its scale, which was, I mean, this was the longest movie that we'd seen by far at the
Yeah.
point that we watched it. And its competency, the way that it used colors and told kind of very human stories about a kind of superhuman dude.
It was
Yeah.
the original Avengers movie.
Oh my God. What was your number 10?
My number 10 was Mary Jane's Mishap
Ooh,
by
yeah.
George Albert Smith.
That's a fun one.
And it's just like a wacky comedy about a woman who blows herself up.
Yeah.
I
had that on my short list, definitely.
but it's almost shockingly well made for the time.
Yeah.
I forget what year it is. I didn't write it down. But it was pretty early on, I would say. And it's got close-ups. It's got like competent editing. It's funny. Like the humor of it holds up for the most part.
Yeah.
It's got good performances. It's got good like effects stuff. And it's just very goofy and silly, which I of course love.
Yeah. I wish that I was able to have more comedy representation on my list, but I don't know. I love the fantastical, and which we'll be seeing shortly.
Yeah.
My number 9 was The Hen That Laid the Golden Eggs, which was by Gaston Vell, I think in 1905. And it was a Méliès alike in the fairy stylings, but it had just some wonderful some wonderful colors, some wonderful like illustrations, and some kind of new effects that we hadn't seen. Um, and it's just like a really, really good time. It told its story visually super well too, and had a lot of like really fun, creepy stuff in it.
It did, yeah. Um, my number 9 is On the Barricade
Mm.
by Elise Guy.
Mm-hmm.
Which is one of her more serious movies, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, there's not really a lot of comedy in it, and a lot of her other movies, even if they're about more serious things, kind of have a slight humorousness to them. And this is like a intense war movie.
Yeah.
And I think just that too of it, like the sort of seriousness and intensity of it, kind of took me by surprise because I wasn't really expecting that from going through the rest of her movies from that year. It's got some really good staging in it. There's the scene of the kid going out into the streets to get water, and he sees like an armed battle happening ahead of him, but it's around a corner, and we're only seeing like people retreating around that corner, and sort of as he approaches it, like more and more people are coming around the corner. We don't actually really see what's going on, but we can get the idea that there's like a battle happening kind of off screen. That shot really impressed me.
Yeah. It's like yeah, it's so well done. I loved it a lot. It's coming up soon on my list. My number 8. You're gonna hate me for this. My number 8 is the teddy bear.
I was going through the list of all the movies you watched, and I was like, Chris is gonna put that on this list.
This movie is absolutely psychotic, and Glen hated it.
I actively dislike this movie.
But I just love how bananas and cruel it is, seemingly for no reason.
It is an incredibly mean-spirited movie.
It's a retelling of it's a mashup of Goldilocks and the Three Bears and the origin story of the idea of a teddy bear, which was Teddy Roosevelt going hunting for bears and sparing a bear cub
after killing its mother.
So this movie,
that part of the story I feel like gets left out a lot. It's like, Teddy Roosevelt didn't murder a bear. Good for him.
Famous environmentalist Teddy Roosevelt slaughtered 2 bears.
Yeah.
Which you see in this. You know, the mama bear and the papa bear from Goldilocks get gunned down by a former president. And how can that not be in my top 10?
Fair. Just the sheer audacity of that film.
Yeah.
I'll give you that. My number 8 is you're gonna hate me for this one because I'm cheating and I chose 2 because they're very similar. And it's a tie between The Drunken Mattress and The Race for the Sausage. I would even maybe throw in the Pumpkin Race in there too. Is also very similar to these. And they're very simplistic, just like a weird thing happens and then a chase.
Yeah.
And the chase sort of goes through different locations, and sort of a weird thing happens at each of the different locations. And it's just really weird and delightful and strange. Drunken Mattress and Race for the Sausage were both directed by Elise Guy. I forget who did the Pumpkin Race. I didn't write the Pumpkin Race down, so that one doesn't really count. But yeah, like Drunken Mattress is just like, there's a lot of really well shot and like well staged stuff in that. There's the shot of the woman who's working on the mattress in the middle of a field, and you see the drunkard like slowly sort of wandering his way through the field in the background, closer and closer, as he's just sort of like staggering around. And you just know that he's going to get inside that mattress sooner or later. And then Race for the Sausage has one of the one of the most impressive stunts of any of the movies that we've watched so far, which is a baby carriage gets run over by a train. There's no baby in it. There's no baby in it. It's one of those gags where you think the baby carriage has a baby in it, and then it doesn't after like something hits it. This might be the first time that's ever been in a movie.
Yeah. All the way up until the famous baby carriage scenes of later silent films.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Baby carriages are a weird thing in silent movies, aren't they?
I guess so. I mean, people just, I don't know. A pram is a very interesting object, just visually.
Yeah.
Kind of funky looking. My number 7 is A Voyage to Jupiter.
Very
which is such a, like, I mean, we talked about this last week, but it's such a wonderfully storybooky and unique take on what Méliès is going for in Trip to the Moon. It feels very uniquely Segundo de Chamon, and it just feels just such a nice time to watch. By the way, also I apologize for keep referencing back to this documentary that you haven't seen yet, but they talk about Méliès's ripoffs in the documentary, and they show some stuff from Voyage to Jupiter that is in HD, and I'm just, where do I find this? Where do I get it?
Yeah,
I need it.
That's the thing. Is like I'm sure it exists. Is the thing. It's just not accessible. Yeah, that does remind me to go off on a very short tangent. Hopefully, Voyage to Jupiter as well as Trip to the Moon. That whole genre of like space movies from this decade, really reminded me of music videos. Probably because music videos have spent the entirety of their existence pulling from silent film and like Méliès movies specifically. And it reminded me of a cool part of that Elise Guy documentary where they talk about her early sound films, of which she was kind of a pioneer. And a lot of them were, or I think almost all of them were music or singing or performance of music of some variety.
Phonosens.
And in the documentary, they compare that to, I think someone pretty much just says that it's like she invented music videos, which is not entirely untrue.
Yeah.
Like it sounds kind of hyperbolic, but I'm like, if not her, then who? You know?
I mean, we're used to music videos for music from the 80s on, but
or 70s, I think maybe. I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know when the typical like starting point for music videos is thought of.
But this was definitely the popular music of the day, so it seems to qualify as a music video. It was even shot. They were even shot to playback. To playback of a external
lip
source.
synced to pre-recorded music. Yeah. My number 7 was The Spring Fairy, directed by someone, probably Segundo de Chamon, who definitely shot it. He might have only shot it or only done the color stenciling, and it may have been directed by someone else. We don't know. Either way, it's a good film. I really like it. I think it tells a pretty short but like simplistic story well. It looks amazing. It's like one of the better looking movies, I think. And it's nice. It's like a couple that don't have any children but want one help an old woman let her in from the snow, who turns out to be a spring fairy who summons a bunch of flowers and trees and things and then grows a baby for them. And
which is a very Elise Guy move of pulling a baby out of plants.
Which is why she is sometimes credited as directing this. I don't really know if she did, because I think she was working at Gaumont at the time, and this is a Pathé film.
Yeah.
Regardless, I like that one a lot.
The next movie that I'm talking about, which is my number 6, is also just called Spring.
Mm.
And I know that I put Voyage to Jupiter ahead of Spring literally last week, but sue me. Um, uh, I think that this movie is so beautiful, and I just felt so nice watching it. It's very impressionistic, which is something that we don't. I mean, we see impressionistic touches on a visual sense in a lot of movies, but uh, seeing something this kind of almost ballet like in its impressionism of just the entire framing of the story, the way that it used the vignettes to really give it this this wonderful sort of frame to all of the action that was happening. I felt like it felt like completely unstuck from its era, and just very beautiful. I liked it.
Mm. It's funny. I think if I just watched that without hearing your thoughts on it, I would have been like, it was fine, whatever. But
Hmm.
I think actually hearing you talk about, you told me about it before I watched it. Um, I think like hearing your appreciation for it made me enjoy it more.
Hmm.
I was able to like appreciate it more fully because you had already been like, it's really good.
It's a
um,
pretty unassuming movie in a lot of other ways.
yeah, yeah. My what number were we on? Number 6
Yeah.
is The Great Train Robbery, which is um one of like the famous ones.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know why I'm
It
like
deserves it though.
it is good. Like
It's very good.
it's Edwin S. Porter's best movie by about 100 miles. Arguably his only good movie. Um,
Right.
and it's we did read up on it. I now kind of have a semi conspiracy theory that not that he didn't direct it, but that a lot of the reason why it's good is because he worked with the lead actor on a lot of the storytelling of it and a lot of the staging of it. I'm like, that's
Hmm.
why it stands. Maybe that's why it stands so like head and shoulders above everything else he's ever made. Um, but yeah, I mean, it has its place in history for good reason. I think like
Yeah.
it's very impressive for the time it was made. I think it holds up pretty well. It's still pretty entertaining. Um, and then you see a guy shooting a gun at the screen at either the beginning or the end, depending on where you saw it in the olden times. But usually the end when you watch it now. They usually
Yeah.
put on at the end.
Super iconic, definitely.
Yeah.
My number 5 is Kingdom of the Fairies,
Mm.
uh, which is a uh wonderful Méliès fairy that is definitely more in the fantasy realm than the sci-fi realm, like A Trip to the Moon.
Hmm.
But it's such a good time. Such a beautiful movie. It's a really good adventure, and there's just a lot of like weirdness in it that just feels very him, like lobster cars. Um, um, Yeah, I like it's like you were talking about in the 1903 episode. It is sometimes the kind of stealth Méliès favorite. A lot of people,
It's the
uh,
contrarian's favorite Méliès film.
yeah, and I think they have a good reason to like it. Because it's just a great time. It's a really great adventure
Yeah.
story.
I'll hold off on talking about it more because it's also on my list. But my number 5, number 6, what are we on?
5.
I forget so quickly. Number 5 is History of a Crime by Ferdinand Secca.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which is it's just really good. I think of all of Ferdinand Secca's kind of like tragic crime movies, um, this one I think is one of the first ones and one of the best.
Yeah,
Um, it
I'm kind of
has
regretting not putting it on my list now.
it has I don't know how much we fact check it, but I think it has the first like depiction of a flashback or like film
Hmm.
depiction of a memory.
Sure.
Um,
At the very least, it does it in a very interesting way visually.
yeah. Um, Yeah, with double exposure and like not really split screen, but like having a wall kind of change into a guy's memory. Um, and yeah, it's just it feels very like artfully made.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, good one.
My number 4 is The Great Train Robbery, which we just talked about. I think that it it's really fun. It's astoundingly good for. I mean, I think when we're talking about our movies right now, we're kind of saying with regret that a D.W. Griffith movie, or we're we're saying, yeah, well, it's good. It's a D.W. Griffith movie, and it's good.
I guess.
Um,
I
and
guess he made a good
way.
one.
I felt the same way about Great Train Robbery, not because Edwin S. Porter is hideously racist, but because it's just like we wanted him to just be this guy that we hate on the whole time because he's
Yeah.
so bad.
Oh yeah. Just yeah, like all of the rest of his movies are just boring and overly long and
Yeah,
not well made.
but this
Except this
one's
one.
really fun. It's
Yeah.
really really fun. I think that you could sit anyone down in front of this movie and they'd have a good time. It's tense
Yeah.
and it's just a good romp.
It was like one of the 2 movies from this time period that I had seen before this. So,
Hmm.
yeah. My number 4 is The Magic Sword, directed by Walter R. Booth.
Yeah,
Super fun. And kind of a hidden gem, I guess. I had never heard of
absolutely.
it, and I don't think I was even going to watch it until you were like, you got to watch this one. And it feels very kind of Méliès inspired. And it's certainly not as kind of well polished as most of his movies were, but it's just like the best Méliès movies. There's just this sense of like anything can happen. Every couple seconds, like a new weird thing appears on screen, and you're like, "Wait, what?" Like you almost have to kind of reframe your idea of what the movie even is a little bit.
Yeah,
Of like,
it's
"Wait a
so
minute, whoa,
ambitious. Yeah.
this is going places I didn't expect it to go." um, the I think that is best exemplified by the appearance of a giant who is uh uh an actor that they've shot closer up, but then really well integrated into the same shot as the other actors. So he appears to just like climb over a wall. And it was just this thing of, I didn't expect the giant to climb over a wall in the middle of this movie. And it was just an utter delight when that happened.
Yeah, it's amazing. Um, my number 3 is On the Barricade.
Mm.
It's very high up on the list, but I was just wowed by this movie. I think that the tone and the seriousness and the drama, the confidence of it, fantastic. Um, I felt like it was super super effective as a movie, and I'm used to more silly or neutral things from Elise Guy. And then she just knocks it out of the park with this like really intense war movie.
Yeah.
And bringing the scale down to like a kid's size too really really makes it pack a punch.
Yeah, yeah. The fact that it is like you're seeing it through the eyes of a kid makes everything just feel so much kind of more, I don't know, just more dramatic and like more intense.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, super good. My number 3 is Legend of a Ghost. Uh, what a picture. I
What a
mean, like,
picture.
what can I even say about this one? It's it's definitely it's one that I had never heard of, had never heard any reference to. It's another Segundo de Chimon fantasy movie, but it is just completely wild and insane and fantastical. I mean, it's the movie where there's a title card that says, what is it? Satan assembles his army,
Yeah.
and the lead character is given a quest by a ghost to go fight and vanquish Satan and
Oh,
steal his uh uh, like eternal flame from hell so that you can get a black pearl from the Mer Kingdom, and then she parties with mermaids for like all of Act 2, and then the devil comes back and gets his revenge, and there's car chases, like weird chariot car chases.
Oh, this movie is so cool. This is
Yeah.
my number 2. So I mean, I guess we can just keep talking about it. This is my this is my number 2.
It's so good.
It's I cannot believe how wild this movie is.
It's one of the few movies that we watched from the podcast that I have recommended to multiple people.
Yes.
Just outside of it, of just like, you should watch this. Like, here's the YouTube link.
Yep.
It's
same.
wild. Check it out.
I think anyone can appreciate this because it is the raddest ancient movie that you've ever seen.
And it is, as far as we can tell, not available in HD anywhere, which is such garbage because it's a gorgeous looking, it's a crazy visual feast.
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating not to be able to watch it in HD.
Great outdoor shooting, great colors.
Yeah.
Super cool, like within cave, just like satanic ritual parties and everything.
One of the only movies to have really dramatic lighting in it. Like, most of these movies are just like shot in it like a greenhouse during the day, so everything's lit up. And this movie is shot in a cave underground using flares and like fire and things.
I would. I said it then. I'll say it again. I would die if somebody made a modern day remake of Legend of a Ghost. Anybody can, so go ahead and do that if you're listening, because this is the coolest movie. This is, though it's not at the top of my list, it is the coolest movie I've seen in a long time, and in the series so far.
Yeah. So rad. It is a heavy metal album cover come to life before and either of those things existed.
That's very true.
Yeah. My number 2 is Kingdom of the Fairies.
Mm-hmm.
What a gorgeous, wonderfully imaginative, whimsical, great thing this is. I think like a lot of the best fantasy movies from this time period, it is that thing of like every couple seconds is a new thing, and it's a new thing that I didn't expect to happen, and didn't even necessarily always expect was like possible.
Yeah.
In some cases, and it's just like there's miniatures in it. There's so much like effects work that is really well done. And it's all done in such a sort of heightened, fantastical way that it never. I think you use the word storybook for one of the other movies
for Voyage to Jupiter, yeah.
And that's very much the vibe of like, it feels like a storybook come to life in the best possible way. Also, there's a big octopus in it.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful movie. This and a bunch of other Méliès films are available on a Blu-ray. Méliès Fairy Tales in Color.
And I think
Flickr
are on
Alley.
Canopy also in pretty high quality.
Yeah,
Maybe?
I'm not sure if the stuff from that Blu-ray is available on Canopy.
Okay.
I know that this is available as part of the Méliès box set that was released like 13 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in more standard definition, but the HD version is gorgeous.
Yeah,
gorgeous.
It definitely, like, for all the contrarians who say it's the best Méliès movie, like, I don't 100% agree, kind of giving away my number 1, but yeah, Kingdom of the Fairies, for anyone who says that it's their favorite Méliès film, I don't disparage that. Like, it's held up for good reason.
Yeah. And we can guess at what the number 1 is. You want to say our number 1s on the count of 3?
Sure.
1, 2, 3.
Uncle Josh and the Spooky Hotel.
Oh, you nailed the joke. I thought we were just going to say A Trip to the Moon at the same time.
No, yeah, my number 1 is Trip to the Moon also, of course. Because it's the most boring answer, but that's because it's the correct answer.
It's clearly the best.
I mean, like I was just saying, Kingdom of the Fairies comes very close for me. I think like I
Mm-hmm.
love Kingdom of the Fairies. I think it's
Yeah.
incredible. I think it's super gorgeous, super impressive. But like Trip to the Moon is just like they say in Hugo, a masterpiece.
It's what dreams are made of. It's you all should go and watch A Trip to the Moon. Weirdly, I think because Lobster Films is like really aggressive about their copyright, it's kind of hard to find a really nice version online. You can see one on Canopy, especially the color version. You can
Mm.
find a pretty good black and white on YouTube. Uh, but seek out this movie because it holds up so well. It gives you such a sense of wonder and awe and adventure, and uh, the sets are beautiful, and especially when you look at it in context of everything leading up to it, it's such a step ahead
Hmm.
in every way.
Oh yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, it's really I think it is impressive to look at even now, just the amount of work that went into it, almost like with all of the like the painted backdrops and things, just look amazing.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, just the sense of like almost like limitless possibility of it too, of just sort of like we can do anything with this. Like we're gonna, you know, set a movie on the moon and have fights with moon men. Um, and that too is like a lot of these movies are fun and like technically impressive and uh whatever else sort of like Trip to the Moon is just a fun romp.
Yeah.
um it moves very quickly, it's fast paced. um like I've been saying over and over again, like there's a new thing every couple seconds that's really cool. There are fights with moon men. um yeah.
Yep. There's fights with moon men. There's moon men doing backflips. Uh,
Doing crab
there's
walks.
uh, there's a big old scene where they fall down from the moon as if it were just floating in the sky
Hmm.
and fall literally straight down into the water.
Yeah.
Um,
And it is also like, even you can tell even at the time it was like it made a big impact because people immediately started doing unauthorized remakes of it,
yeah.
like right away. Like right away, they were just like, everyone just do moon movies now, and none of them are anywhere near as good. The Jupiter one is probably the next best like space movie, maybe because it feels so different.
Yeah.
Um, but it's the best movie of the 1900s. Pretty much. I think it's pretty agreed upon.
Now we've done the work to make sure. Now we've
Yeah,
done the work to know for sure
exactly.
that this is the best movie of the 1900s.
Yeah.
People told us it was the best, and we had to waste dozens of hours to make sure.
Correct.
We couldn't have just listened to them.
Yeah. That was our that was our entire inspiration for doing this. Was we said, we don't believe you. Yeah. What a decade.
What a decade. Lot to look forward to in the next one.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that'll about wrap it up.
I guess so.
If you are interested in following us online, we have a spiffy Instagram, which I'm trying to post fun little photographs that I find in my research on the Instagram story, and then we'll tell you whenever a new episode comes out, which is today because you're listening to one.
Hey.
And we know that you listen on the first day. Got to get those dollars in, those advertising dollars.
Wait a minute, you're getting advertising dollars from this?
We'll talk about it later. Yeah, thanks so much for listening. I don't know if anybody actually really is listening, but if you are, thank you.
We appreciate it.
We appreciate it.
If you exist.
Yeah. And we hope you continue to journey along with us into film itself. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Thank you, Jeff Goldblum.
Yes.
Continue our journey into film itself. Fascinating.
Oh, time to cut this off. So, of course, you can follow us on Instagram. I think that's probably where I'll post the most, but we got a Twitter, and we have a YouTube, which has all video versions where you can watch along with us. There's a playlist and everything that shows you all the movies you need to watch to prepare for the episode. And that's about it, I think.
I love that, one, we're assuming that anyone's listening to this, and also we're assuming that they're preparing for it.
Right.
That's very fun. Hey, maybe someone is. That would be great.
We love you if you are. But anyway, yes, that'll do it. See you next year. Goodbye. 1910 ahoy. See you later, Glen.